it's safe to say the most popular model of driver on tour probably shouldn't be used by the average golfer. But when I noticed what is the most popular model of driver still in 2025, combined with the fact you could probably get this for around £250 nowadays, it got me thinking, could this be the one time the most popular driver on tour is not only affordable, but also a good blend for some of you amateur golfers out there. Guys, how you doing? Welcome back to a brand new video. Simon here, SAS Golf Academy, where I do all my in-person teaching, online tuition, as well as second-hand club fitting. And I've had this theory for a while. I'm excited for this test today because I want to hopefully open some of your eyes, as well as try and tick off some of these suspicions that I've had. So therefore, let me introduce you to what is the most popular model of driver on tour at the moment, because it's quite surprising. Now, as you see here on the right-hand side, Titleist is the most used brand of driver on tour. So there's multiple pros, and they've got a huge stable of Titleist players. So obviously they're going to be fitted into GT2s and GT3s and GT4s, etc. However, the one model of driver, 16 players using the same model of driver, still in 2025. And again, to be fair, I'll go down the list as well, because some of these people have had it in the bag since 2023 and moved to other tours, etc., etc. But a good portion of those players are still using the G430 LST. And it's not to say Ping players don't use other Ping drivers. There's some Ping players that are using the G440 Max, for example, which is the super forgiving. There's not many of them. Some are using the G425 Max still, for example. However, the majority of Ping pros are almost bottlenecked into the LST. They have to go to the LST and still de-loft it and still put a Tour X stiff shaft in it, because I feel it is still quite a high spinny head in 2025. Let me explain why that is a good thing. Before we go into that, let's compare it to the Titleist players, for example, and notice how many of them are using, let's say, the GT4, which is Titleist low spinning, low launching, what to the average golfer and what the public would presume would be the same as this, for example, hardly any of them are using it. There's a split through the Titleist players of GT2s, GT3s, TSR2s, TSR3s, and to be perfectly honest, I imagine, apart from personal preference, a Titleist club fitter or their tour truck fitters fit those pros either into TSR2 or TSR3 by just tweaking loft and shaft combinations. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're under, let's say, 95 miles an hour in terms of club head speed with a driver, I certainly wouldn't recommend this head, because it's not enough speed for this particular head style, and potentially some of the shafts that you're going to get in them as well, to give yourself, mind you, that's not too bad. I was going to say not enough speed or launch to actually get pretty good numbers, but actually at 98 miles an hour, this has even got a Tour X stiff shaft in it at 10.5 degrees. That's quite good spin from a low spin head. And realistically, that's what I want to test today, because this is a 440cc head, so that's small. Again, obviously the limit for driver heads are 460. This is my other test subject, a TSI 3. So still the, let's say, on the lower launching, lower spinning player's head style, but not all the way with the TSI 4. But this is 460cc, so a bigger volume. However, what people don't seem to see is that manufacturers can use that volume any which way they like. So they can either make the face deeper, or they can make it longer front to back, or wider heel to toe, whichever way they want to put it. So even though this is the lower spinning version from Ping itself, it's actually bigger, or looks like a bigger footprint to the Titleist, even though this is the end of the spectrum in terms of the Ping low spin lineup. Again, just look at the face difference. Look how much wider this is, the Ping G440 LST, to the Titleist TSI3 that we have here. If I actually wanted a similar footprint to what I'm seeing, I'd probably have to go to a TSR2, where now all of a sudden, yes, it is a bit wider heel to toe. Actually, they are kind of mimicking the kind of same head styles that we see there. And no, I'm not saying every golfer should go and get the G430 LST, or that this head is better than the Titleist by any stretch of the imagination. I just feel like we get into one brand's low spin head is exactly the same as another low spin head from another manufacturer, or their forgiving version of their head is just as forgiving as the other manufacturers. It's kind of not the case. Not to mention technique plays a huge part in what shaft and head style and potentially brand is also going to suit you, which is a good time to mention the sponsor of this video, considering they share the same ethos as myself. Good, affordable advice. Swingtweaks is one of the most easy and effective coaching apps that's available on iOS and Android. You can send them videos from anywhere in the world. All you need is a video face on and also down the line. And they've recently updated that app so that not only do they give you great high quality PGA Professional advice with custom tutorials and full descriptions, but actually a practice plan. So you can go away and work on the techniques that they've told you to get better at, which is so important as this game isn't about quantity of practice as much as it is quality practice. If that sounds a perfect fit for yourself and you want 20% off your first Swingtweak, use my code SASGolf and I'll leave some links in description. Now, before we go into the Titleist test, it wouldn't be a good video of mine if I didn't champion older models and performance changes, because a lot of tour pros, when they were using this, upgraded to this instantly. And I've got a bit of a suspicion why nobody, or let's say nobody, not as many tour pros have jumped straight away this year to the G440 LST. And I'll show you prices of the G425 here on the right hand side. And some of you still might not have the club head speed for the LST, even though this isn't as low spinning as other brands' low spin heads. So the G425 Max, great driver. However, I'm not talking about head styles. I'm certainly not talking about performance, as what I'm hopefully going to show you here with the same shaft, the same head, both of these drivers, why this one got basically booted out on so many Tour Pros heads. And as I can see there, very good numbers of what I'm expecting in terms of efficiency, 1.47, 2,500 spin, 13 launch. However, if you had the option to have those kind of numbers, you're a ping staff player, but you're tired of hearing a frying pan being hit every time that you're on the tee box, well, then you would, wouldn't you? You'd change to something that sounds better, potentially feels better. Sound and feel go hand in hand. It's going to give you the same numbers as the G425, in my opinion, and hopefully what I'm about to prove and show you right now. But that carbon looks great, and it certainly sounds a lot better. Touch bottomy, so that won't come out as good. That's more like it. My point is, apart from that misstrike for me, they're identical in terms of performance. And again, we have to factor in a bit of human error as well. Obviously, I swung the G430 slightly faster. That's got nothing to do with head design. But also at these speeds, how important launch and spin is. This is why I keep talking about head design, not just loft, not just shaft. They all play a part, don't get me wrong, but strike location. The G425 there, I hit higher off the face. I felt it. Therefore, it launched higher and spun less. That's gear effect. So 168.5 ball speed, not necessarily as much ball speed, still went almost just as far as something that came out the middle. I flushed the G430. Therefore, it launched how it should do. It spun how it should do. But then as a result of that, went the same kind of distance. These are both phenomenally good, lower spinning heads in the market. One just sounds considerably better than the other. And because the G440 LST also has a carbon crown and probably sounds familiar, I imagine that's why Tour Pros haven't jumped at the chance of swapping. But there is a certain thing as placebo in this game, and some guys just like to keep the equipment in the bag that they know just, well, works. So we move into our final test, and why this is interesting. Yes, loft makes a difference, yes, shaft makes a difference, but so does head design, and different brands' head designs. This TSI 3, okay, at 10 degrees, opposed to the 10.5 of the ping. But I've got a standard tensile blue, so this is a very generic mid-launch, mid-kick point shaft versus the Cali White which to be honest is low launch, low spin. Not only that, I've got it in a 60-gram Tour X stiff shaft. So on paper, you would have thought with that whole driver that it should be much more lower spinning, much more lower launching than what I have in my hand here. But what I've found from drivers, especially ones that have big, deep faces, and the ability to hit high up on the face, just like I did a minute ago with the G425, that actually they do produce, in my opinion, a lot less spin. They don't produce as much spin when they're set up in this configuration. Okay, that was a bit loopy, I have to say, and again, that was a touch high off the face, kind of proving a point. Now that's a bit toey, which is always my bad shot. And if you've got a low spin driver, and it's not a low spin driver, it's kind of a low spin driver in my hand, as I always drop the spin low just through my mechanics. But this has got quite high torque, especially when you compare it to something like this. This is incredibly low torque. However, if I put this shaft into this head, that's going to drop my spin even more. I don't want my spin to be dropped. If anything, I want more spin. I just don't want to go left. So how do I build a driver with low torque that still keeps the spin to a certain area that I feel comfortable with? Well, it's kind of why I'm landing on this. And as you can see here, that knuckleball to the left-hand side, we're now going under 2,000. Under 2,000 at 170 miles an hour is really low. And I'm not saying this TSI 3 head and shaft is a low spinning combination. In an amateur golfer that comes, let's say, over the top, cups the hands, adds loft, adds spin loft, is probably a perfect driver for them. However, as I said, there's certain amateur golfers that the G430 LST would be perfect for. And those kind of golfers are very similar to myself. Because yes, this TSI 3 is a great sounding, great feeling driver. There's no question about that. And I appreciate I'm exaggerating this slinging draw, but I'm kind of doing it for a reason. And it's that same reason why I said this driver could be good for quite a few amateur golfers, if they're like me. I like having X-stiff shafts because they have low torque, it stops it going left. However, the downside is it drops my spin because low torque shafts technically have a higher kick point, therefore it doesn't twist as much and we're dropping that dynamic loft. That's not what I want. So if I have a head design at the bottom, that's shallow, wide, left to right, okay, slightly smaller, so it's that kind of perfect balance of low spin as well as a touch of forgiveness. But now I have a club that I'm confident with, that spins more, arguably, than, let's say, more forgiving heads in the market. But at my speed, I like this. That takes off side spin if I hit it left or hit it right. More importantly, I'm allowed to have a shaft in here with low torque and it not drop under 1900. Why? Because it's that much of a thinner face. I can't hit it high toe or high off the face to give me that snap hook because it doesn't really exist with this head style. My point from this video is that there's a reason why so many Titleist staff players use the TSI3, the GT3, the TSR3, not the GT4, not the really end of the spectrum. Remember, this is Ping's end of the spectrum LST head that I have here today. That's supposed to be more forgiving, yet so many pros use the TSI3. They even use the TSI2. However, Ping Tour pros almost have to go G430 LST, the G440 LST, the G425 LST, and they drop the launch. They're using 7-degree heads and obviously incredibly X-stiff shafts. However, does it make it a bad driver head, or does it make either of these driver heads better than another? No. What I'm trying to say for that player, if you're like myself, and you hate this left shot, like so, but at the same time, you need to keep your spin up like I do, way too up on the ball with too much of a closed club face, then the only option I have is high spinning heads, which used to be, again, your maxes, which are offset, your forgiving heads that, again, turn that face in. This right here is a perfect build for me because this LST head that's not offset, sits neutral to the ground, still spins more than most manufacturers. You can change that with loft and shaft. Yes, but it also means I can have a low torque shaft in my hands that stops that left shot, but doesn't drop my spin out of the sky like a lead balloon. Again, thank you to Swingtweaks for obviously sponsoring this video. Any questions you might have, sasgolfacademy.com. Catch you guys later.